like it is the stupidest thing that I have ever read or seen, and I have watched all of Riverdale. Hello ladies, gents, and non-binary mates, and welcome back to Beauty in the Bookcase, where we take a book and we make a look. So I usually don't hate read things because I think reading should be a pleasant, positive experience, an escape from, you know, the world and all the terrible things in it. So when I first bought this book, I was already familiar with the controversy surrounding it, and I was pretty iffy about it, but I figured I can't really criticize something that I haven't read, and I wanted to sort of understand a little bit more, have a bit more of a first-hand perspective with the story before saying anything about it. But I don't want to just say that, oh, it's a terrible book and that's it. I do want to sort of delve a bit more deeply into what the issues were, because I feel like a lot of it has been watered down to, oh, Hispanic people are mad that a white person wrote a book about Hispanic people. And I don't think that's the main argument. Yes, I've seen that going around, but I've also seen a lot of really great articles from, you know, Hispanic people just kind of expressing that that's not the issue. They don't have a problem with somebody who's not Latino writing a book about Latinos. They're not trying to limit what an author can do, because the whole point of writing is to explore things. And if we only limit it to our personal experiences, then that of course limits the amount of stories there would be out there. I think the problem comes down to how much research you put into it. And I do want to say that I'm approaching this both as an author myself and, you know, as somebody who currently is writing a book set in Manchester, right? And I'm not English. I've never been to Manchester. So what does that mean? That means I've been having to look up a lot of things. And it's also set in the 70s. So it means I've been doing, you know, every time I think of writing something down, I'm like, but is that right? Is that correct? I've been double checking even the tiniest things, like, oh, when did this thing exist, or was this word used in this time period, or is there a difference between the UK word for this and then the American word for this, and even reaching out to friends who are a bit more familiar with UK English. And I've even thought about, you know, eventually when the book is a lot more advanced, reaching out to somebody who is English, and particularly if I could find somebody from Manchester to look it over and tell me if it's authentic, because I'm putting in experiences that I'm gathering from what I'm researching, but that might not be reflective of who they are. And that is what every author is supposed to do, right? It's not, don't write about this because it's not your experience, but it's take the time and actually put in the work, and it's going to be a lot of work. And it often feels distracting because you're like, well, I can't spend 50 hours just researching these things. I need to actually write my book. But at some point you need to be like, okay, maybe now that I have the general story, let's take a step away from it and go talk to somebody and see what their experiences are and see if this reads authentically to them. And then I'm also approaching this from the perspective of being Latina myself. Now, I do have some reviews, both written and video format reviews, down in the description below from other Latino authors, because I don't have that experience, right? I'm very white passing, and I'm very aware of that privilege, and I'm very aware that my experience is not the same as, you know, the experience depicted here. So I don't want to speak out of turn. So there's certain things that I might not discuss because it's not my place, and you can read some more about that in some of the videos and articles I linked below. Now, honestly, I don't want to be unfair and just be like, oh, this book was garbage, because you know what bothered me the most about this book is that if a book is like poorly written, then I can at least be like, okay, it's hot garbage, but it's hot garbage because this was somebody who writing is just not for them. You know, the ability to type does not always translate into the ability to actually write. But the problem is that this book is not, at least in my opinion, poorly written. I mean, there are some issues with it that I'm not really going to cover. I know the video I linked below by Regina Rodriguez Martin does kind of go into more of like the issues of the book as just a book itself, as well as like the Hispanic perspective. But really, I was honestly kind of upset with myself towards the beginning, because I was like, I'm actually enjoying this. It's written well. I felt anxious and stressed, and I was feeling all these emotions along with the characters, which meant it was written well. you know, that wasn't the problem. It's not a problem about it's not about the author being untalented. Like, I genuinely want to find one of her other books and read it and review that as well, because I'm sure when I know some of her other books are about her personal experiences, and I feel like that will give me kind of a better understanding of who she is as an author. Let's just start with the main issue, which is culture and the misrepresentation of culture that happens in this book. There were tiny things that bothered me that I'm sure bothered other Hispanic, Latino people, that your average reader who is not in that population they're not going to pick up on it. So you might be like, okay, well, whatever, you're nitpicking. So I'll start with the nitpicking. There were things like, for example, there's a part where Lydia is describing something about her mother's house and talks about carpeting, for example, and that took me out of it because Hispanic houses don't have carpeting. You know, you might find it in like a hotel or something, but carpeting is just not something that's used. And then there's this other part where Luca is talking about how he was gonna go down to he was like saying something about how he remembered going down into his grandma's basement, and that also tripped me up because I was like, I'm pretty sure like basements are a pretty American fixture. Like, again, I've never been to a house in Latin America where there is a basement, and I don't think they're super common in Europe either. I might be mistaken there, but you know, whatever. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna Google it. I Googled both of these things. Quick Google search told me no, carpeting is not common in Mexican houses, and no, Mexican houses don't tend to have basements because apparently the soil in Mexico is just, it's too hard to actually dig, and there's no point in doing, like, it's more effort than it's worth. And that bothered me because you might be like, okay, whatever, it's two tiny things, who cares if there's basements and carpets? And it's like, it's not so much about that, but the fact that a 2-second Google search gave me the answer and it was incorrect. But let's get to more major points before you're just like, is that the only thing you have to say? No, that's not the only thing I have to say. So one of my biggest issues, and it's an issue that I saw in a lot of these reviews from other people, was just the use of Spanish is so bizarre. Like, it feels like an episode of Dora the Explorer. It just felt so cartoonish because it would just be kind of like these random one-word translations that half of the time just didn't, like, they weren't relevant to the plot, and they weren't like cultural things. And while we do have things, for example, like the use of mija, or even the use of like quinceañera and stuff like that, that stuff I didn't mind because it was trying to present this culture. But then there were like these random instances, like the one that bothered me the most because it felt the most pointless was Luca had this like soccer ball lamp. It was shaped like a soccer ball, and consistently we would get the words balón de fútbol, so soccer ball, just shoved in Spanish. But that lamp played zero, like there was no reason for it to be there other than to be like, here's a random word in Spanish. And it was so frustrating because it just felt so like, I'm just trying to remind you that this is in Mexico and these are Mexican people, but it never felt natural or justified enough. And actually, another video that I linked below by Sergio Gomez, he was talking about, and I didn't know this because I grew up with the word, so I guess I didn't realize this, was apparently, so they use the word carajo a lot, which is like shit or fuck, damn, you know, just kind of like a general curse word. But apparently he said that word isn't really used in Mexico, and when I Googled it, it said that it's actually quite taboo to use that word. But the thing is, in Puerto Rico, you use that word all the time. And it makes sense that the author would have used it because her only connection to, you know, Latin America is her grandmother is Puerto Rican or something. There's no way no one said this to you. So either you willfully surround yourself with people who are going to defend everything you do, or you just decided to ignore them because you thought you knew better. And that's really problematic if that was the case. Well, either way, it's pretty problematic. And then a thing that I had an issue with, because I know a lot of people pointed out, like, you know, it did kind of just go like Mexico is a hellhole. Here's what I think. I think the reasoning behind it was, if I make sure Mexico is painted as like this super, super scary, dangerous place, then people are going to be less, well, people are going to be more accepting of immigrants coming in because they're escaping the situation. But I think it just ends up having the opposite effect. I think it ends up becoming this like, ooh, Mexico, bad, it's all crime, it's the worst place in the world, that's why you need to come to America. I just don't understand why this was written the way that it was. So I'm pretty sure that our main character is white passing, and that's fine. I mean, they're worried though. It was kind of an issue in this case that, of course, our protagonist had to be white passing and perfectly fluent in English and middle class. My issue was that this woman consistently pointed out when people were like, when brown people were around her, like she'd be like, oh, they're brown skin, they were browner than me, I was getting browner, my son was getting browner. It was like this weird, almost fetishizing, but also this weird like complex of like, I'm white and different and good, these people are still outside of me. And the thing is, yeah, okay, don't get me wrong, I'm not gonna be here and be like, oh, nobody notices race in Latin America. They do. There's racism, particularly if you're really, really dark. It's just a fact. It sucks. I'm not gonna defend it, but it's just a fact. My issue was just that, and then you have this weird part that was really confusing, because she says like, I think they were like getting stopped or something by La Migra, like immigration patrol and stuff, and she was gonna be like, oh, the girls are my daughters, but then she's like, well, they're too brown like to pass as my children. And I saw somebody point this out, and I was also like, what? Like, if you've ever met a Hispanic family, we do not look like we're related to each other. And then the last thing I wanted to say about this was that for a book that was like, no, I want to vilify, I want to defend the Hispanic community and show people that they're not all violent people, there's a lot of violent people. If you're trying to defend and be like, the people coming to America aren't violent, then why the hell are you then going to throw in random violence? I'll tell you why in a minute. But what I'm saying though is, you know, you can still show instances of violence without the characters that you're trying to be like, no, there's good people doing these things, especially when it's characters that are actually a lot more important to the story. Let's just move on to my issue with the characters in this book. Honestly, I had a lot of problems with these characters. Quite frankly, the only people I cared about by the end of this book were Soledad and Rebecca. So Soledad and Rebecca are these two sisters from Honduras. They are, I think, 14 and 15. They're young teenagers. But they are sexualized this entire book. And I wish I was joking, but literally every chapter they're in is either Lydia talking about how pretty they are and how that poses a danger to them, or them having to use their beauty to get something, or somebody else sexualizing them and sexually harassing and sometimes essaying them. They're not treated like real people at any point. They're literally just consistently treated like objects, and it is insane, because not only is that obviously, you know, perpetuating the fact that it's okay to sexualize women, but it's also saying it's okay to sexualize children. Like, what? It was awful, and they went through so much that it really does make you care for them. And like I said, by the end of this book, they were the only people that I really cared about, you know, seeing them make it to the States and be happy. Now on to our main characters. I don't know which of these two people I liked least. Like, Lydia is, oh, so stupid and selfish the entire time. She is a terrible representation of anyone, really. I don't care who you are. I'm sure you'll read this character and be like, I would never relate to this woman. I would never want to be associated with this woman. She is, oh God, she gets on my nerves. And I swear, if you had a time lapse of me reading this book, it's me just constantly being like, and wanting to chuck the book at the wall. Like, honestly, it's, ugh. I'm gonna leave a link to a Google Doc with like all of my notes per chapter if you want to read those, because if not, this, like, covering everything that I did not like about this book would take like 50 hours. So I'm gonna leave that there. Warning, there is some adult language because I was really upset. Lydia, just, after the death of her family, which is major, I'm not denying that, this woman experiences zero inconvenience for the rest of this book. Like, everything just works out for her easily. She never runs out of money. Or when she does, she has somebody who's able to like help her. Like, the worst thing, literally the worst thing, aside from the death of her family that happens to her in this book, is that she's twisted her ankle. Why should I care about her? She has zero stakes. She does not face a single inconvenience that isn't easily solved. And that makes me not care for her because there's nothing. Like, I just kind of go like, okay, whatever. We're facing an issue. I wonder what plot convenience we're gonna get to solve this one. It's just really hard to invest in her, especially because she is like bizarrely unaware of the realities of her country. And you don't need to be involved in like the lower class or the deeper circles of society or whatever in a country where there's violence to know that there's violence. You know what I mean? Like, I grew up pretty sheltered and, you know, like middle class, but I would never be like, there's crime in Puerto Rico? People get murdered? There's poverty in Puerto... What? That's how this character reads half of the time. It's like she's learning these things about her own country that she's lived in her entire life for the first time in this book, which is like, why? How do you not, like, do you just never leave your house? Like, I don't under... And her husband is like, well, was a reporter. Like, there's literally no way she's not like hearing about the news all the time, or she's like the world's least supportive wife and just has like zero interest in her husband's work. Like, the characters around her face so much violence and grief and pain, and she can only think about herself. And I get it, like, in that situation you do, to an extent, only have to think about yourself, but then only give me the journey of her and her son. Don't involve all these other people and then expect me to be sympathetic towards somebody who hasn't shown an ounce of sympathy for a single character aside from being like, yeah, that's really sad, that sucks for him. Like, what? And, oh my god, this part pissed me the fuck off. Okay, so they're about to get into with the coyote to leave, whatever, and they're at this lady's house buying some stuff, and the lady's like, oh, I'm gonna give you, like, do you need a jacket? And she's like, no, my son's fine. And she's like, it's a gift, I'll give you a jacket and like a scarf or like a hat or something that, mind you, her son, she said, did not need. So then they're getting on the pickup truck to leave, and they realize Beto, who finished paying off her freaking fee so she could even leave with the coyote, doesn't have a jacket. And instead of her being like, oh yeah, let me just give you the other jacket, she does nothing. She's like, how sad. Like, her son's like, mommy, can we do something? And she's just like, if only there was a jacket that we can get. No, she does nothing. Nicolas, this random med student, is nice enough to plot convenience his way out of this. But really, oh my god, the part, y'all, when I tell you I started laughing because I was so mad at this, it was the stupidest thing I've ever seen, ever. Okay, so the whole like big scary thing of this story, right, is that she is running away from this very scary drug lord. That's been the thing that has been stressing us out for like 300 pages. And suddenly, this idiot of a fucking woman who is so not a real person, because no fucking person with a brain would behave this way, she video calls him, okay? She video calls the person that she's been avoiding. She's like, no, we can't use cell phones, and we can't do this, and we can't do that, because it's all, you know, we're trying to hide from this man, which, like, valid. I'm not saying that was wrong or, you know, not the correct, like, approach to the situation. But we have spent 300 pages being told how dangerous this man is, how he can't catch us, and being made to feel like there's something behind us, except there's literally never a sign until like the end. You're expecting me to believe that a person who's in that actual danger would be dumb enough to video call this person and be like, what you did, it was messed up and you shouldn't have done it. And then you expect me to believe that big man narcotraficante over here is gonna be like, okay, I won't haunt you. Like, he doesn't say it, but you're expected to believe like that's the end of that, so that the like fear isn't there anymore. And it's so stupid. Like, it is the stupidest thing that I have ever read or seen. And I have watched all of Riverdale, and this is still stupider than a Riverdale plotline. No hate to Riverdale. It's a mess, but I love it. And then she's just like constantly complaining about how she doesn't have money. Like, every time she loses some money, even though she has like all this money from her mom and all this plot convenience money, as I'm gonna call it. And it's just like, you do realize that like most immigrants leave with like no money. And they get robbed and they get assaulted and they have horrible things happen to them. You have had a twisted ankle and you still have money when you get to America. Or maybe I think maybe she doesn't in the end. But like, still, you had all this money to help you get there in a way that a bunch of other people aren't lucky enough, and she never acknowledges that. The entire time she's like, oh my god, I'm like running out of I don't care for you because you're not a real person and you're not fucking smart. And as somebody pointed out, if she was actually resourceful, like any immigrant would be, particularly somebody who is in the beneficial, privileged position of being middle class, all she had to do at the start of the book was bribe the people at the like papers place to give her like her like make a little fake quick passport for her son, or like ID or something, and then fly out. Anyway, let's move on to Luca before I like die. What can I tell you about Luca? I feel bad because Luca is like an 8-year-old, but I hate him. One of my biggest problems with Luca's character is that honestly, he never convinced me as an 8-year-old, you know? Like, the way he talks, like in some chapters it sounds like he's like 5. He sounds like so like too young almost. But then you'll flip a few pages and then he's talking like he's like a 14-year-old who's, you know, in his emo phase and he's seeing things. And like, I get that obviously, you know, trauma obviously makes you grow up very fast, and I'm not denying that, but this isn't like half of the time there's not even like the span of a week between these changes. It'll be like one page he's like, oh mommy, I have a blister, my life is so hard, blah blah blah, and the next is just like, no, she's her own person and blah. I don't buy him. And he had the stupidest quirk that I understand that it was there for a point, like a purpose, but the thing is, you should have brought it up quickly, not taken like 4 pages to explain quickly at the beginning, and then used it for your benefit in that point, and then never talked about it again. And I would have been fine with it, because this child like recites geography facts and everyone around him is like, wow, he is so into, let's give him money, what a cool. Have y'all ever been around a child who just has interests that you don't care about? Like, at first you're just like, wow, yeah, that's so cool, whatever. But if it's a child consistently being like, did you know that the capital of Colorado is Denver and there's these many people and blah blah, you just, at least mentally you'd just be like, please shut up. I will give you money to shut up. If somebody had given him money to shut up, I would have bought that. But we're meant to, everyone's like, wow, he's so smart, he knows geography facts. And it's just annoying. And it was, I understand why it was there. It was used fine in the moment that it was needed, but we never needed to hear it again, and yet we do. Beyond that, we have Javier, who's like your cliche Latin lover, tough guy, but he writes poetry because he's like deep, you know? But what really pissed me off about this man was, so this whole expose is written about him. It's the main reason why we're running away is because what's her face, Lydia's husband wrote an article about him, and it's a big deal, whatever. He's not bothered by the article. No, he's bothered by plot convenience, but it was the weirdest freaking plot twist. So it ends up being, sorry, massive spoiler, but it's also stupid, and like they could have revealed this at the start and it just doesn't change anything about the plot. So apparently the real reason he's after her is not because of the article in general. The real reason he like murdered her entire family was because somehow, you know, it's never explained who Seba works for, but it doesn't seem like, you know, he works for like CNN or Univision or something, right? He's a local reporter. And yet somehow his article made it all the way to Spain, where Javier's daughter was in Barcelona in like a boarding school or something. And apparently this girl didn't have even an inkling that her dad did something marginally suspicious to make his money. So apparently she like ends up unaliving herself, and that's what triggered it. Just felt so random and so not, I mean, I don't know, I'm not the daughter of a narco, but I assume even if your parents don't outright tell you like I push drugs for a living and murder people, I think you kind of, you know, you have a general idea that your dad probably isn't, you know, a doctor or something. So my favorite part, the trauma porn of this story. Okay, first of all, in general, this book genuinely should have just been like at least like 150 pages shorter. And the reason I say that is simply because there is so much repetition in this book, but like pointlessly. Like we just have get on the train, get off the train, get off the train, get off the train. And then it's just like, walk through the desert, stop. Walk through the desert, stop. Like, it's just a bunch of things, but particularly, at least with the parts in the desert, you know, the story is evolving throughout and there's different things happening. Whereas every single scene on the train, I was like, why are we here again? Like, you're stressing me out about if you guys are gonna make it. Somebody's gonna get hurt, somebody's not gonna get hurt. Everything will be fine. You get off, you get on. It just, you can't help but feel that the only reason why she decided to go through the train with La Bestia was because it was gonna give the most shock value. It's obvious that she didn't care to actually show what normally happens, because I mean, most immigrants fly in, and a woman in her circumstances, there's no reason she wouldn't fly in. Like, all you have to do is just be like, yeah, I'm going on holiday, bye, and then just stay, which is what most people do tend to do. But of course, that's not dramatic. That's not gonna make your reader go like, oh my god, what, this is crazy and scary. So of course she is like, no, I'm not gonna make it easier, but then I'm also not gonna put, again, I'm not gonna put any stakes into my main characters' lives, so the people who do get hurt are just the people around them. And so you can't tell me it's not trauma porn when you have characters being essayed and murdered or dying in the middle of the desert, having asthma, which did not need to be a plot point unless you wanted to make it dramatic and you wanted to pull on your reader's heartstrings by being like, oh, little kids with asthma have to go through the desert and then they die. You just wanted to exploit the other people. Like, you can tell that the only reason these scenes are here are to evoke like anxiety in the reader, and they're effective. I'm not saying that, like, I got really stressed, but what I'm saying is, though, first of all, if it's not trauma porn, we don't need 16 chapters of you getting on and off a train. have it be one time, right? One time, it was really scary, you have all these fears, and then you made it on the train and you're done. And you can also tell that it's trauma porn because none of these massive things that happen are talked about, right? Like with any depth. It's like Soledad, for example, has a miscarriage, and like I said, we never talk about it again. When Lorenzo is murdered, happens, never talk about it again. We don't talk about like the psychological ramifications that having a miscarriage and killing someone would have on like someone's psyche. If you want to put that in your story, you need to give me that, or I'm obviously going to be inclined to believe that what is trauma porn. You can't tell me that you're not trying to manipulate people's emotions. And yeah, of course, all art is manipulating emotions, but there's doing it for a purpose and making me think about things, and then there's just doing it for shock value. Like, that's the thing. As I read a lot of these scenes, it felt very much like those scenes in 13 Reasons Why. Like, sure, I know that a lot of people take that train. I have a very hard time imagining a mother of an 8-year-old kid going like, yep, this is our only option, without even trying. Like, she tries to get on a plane, fails once, and then just goes like, well, I guess we're going on the train, because that's what's gonna sell, because that's what's entertaining. And it pissed me off. You want to know why? Because the thing is, when I did my review of Dominicana, like, I know one of the things that really pissed me off from the reviews there was the people were like, it just felt like it could be anyone's story. Like, the reason they don't sell is because they don't do trauma porn, because they try to actually tell a story that's realistic, because they approach this from the like perspective of most people. Most people aren't coming to America because narcos killed a bunch of their family members. Most people are coming to America because they don't have fucking food, because they don't have electricity, because everything is like insanely expensive and life is really difficult, and so they need to leave, and they need to deal with the grief of leaving their living family and going to America and having to struggle and face all these challenges. But you know what? That's the thing that I loved most about Dominicana. It was that it felt real, it felt authentic. Even with Book of Unknown Americans, right? These stories, none of these people were like, yeah, I came on this really harrowing journey and then everything was terrible. Like, they're normal people who are stressed about their visas, who are stressed about being caught by ICE, who get profiled, who get treated like shit, who have to deal with coming to a country that they don't know the language in. All this book says is that you need to have a shitty life as an immigrant, and you need to suffer, and you need to almost fucking die for your life to matter to Americans. I kept having this thought as I read the book, and then it made sense at the end. And the acknowledgements, there's a part where she says that essentially she wrote this book after her dad died as a way to like cope with the grief. And that is the thing. That's what I felt this book should have been all along. Like, I kept going through this book and being like, you know what should have happened in this book that still could have expressed the struggles of immigrants without it being trauma porn? Was make it a story about grief. You can have your dramatic narcos killed everyone, la quinceañera, whatever, if you must, you can have that. But then have them be able to get through the checkpoint at the airport, fly to America, deal with the issues of being undocumented and not having a lot of money, and even the fact that like she was flying to like a cousin that she hadn't spoken to in years or something. You know, have her deal with those things that are, honestly, that's the thing, you know, this book treats it like you get to America and then all your problems stop as an immigrant and everything's honky-dory. Was this book should have been was they get to America, you can still have those struggles of immigrants, but then make it a story about Lydia and Luca actually dealing with this grief. There's just better books to read out there if you genuinely care about the immigrant experience and you genuinely want to learn. If you don't care about it and you just want, you know, action adventure and you want somebody to just give you a bunch of shock value scene after scene, read this book. But I can't in good conscience recommend it. I think it's really disappointing that this has been, you know, touted as this great book. And I do know that obviously it has received a lot of criticism now, but there's already been so much praise for it, and it's already been, you know, kind of like put on this pedestal because of Oprah's book club, that unfortunately, because so many of the dissenting voices are people of color, the people who do need to hear that this story is messed up aren't getting the information that they need to make an informed opinion. This was a weird review. I normally try and just like discuss the themes that I really enjoyed from different books. I will hopefully never hate read anything ever again, because this was an awful experience. So yeah, if you enjoyed seeing me having a mental breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more videos kind of like this, just a lot less angry. Hit that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload, and I will see you guys next time.